So yeah, my parents in '76 bought a brand new Hillman Avenger estate because they knew they were going to have a family. My brother's older than me. And we had that car from '76 until I think the year 2000, or it might have been 1999. I mean, like a massive chunk of time. And I was born in '79, my brother was born in '77, so we came home from hospital in it, we went on holiday in it, to school in it, learned to drive in it. It got crashed several times. I drove it across a golf course once. We used to regularly get parts for it from scrapyards. And I don't know whether it's a bit of a Somerset thing, but we used to go to scrapyards like many weekends. Me and my brother, Mum would make us a packed lunch, we'd get our boots and coats on, and we'd just go with Dad to the scrapyard. And I honestly thought that was normal. I didn't think that was a strange thing to do. And so as a consequence, I used to go to these great scrapyards where there was loads of old cars, you know, like 50s and 60s cars back then you'd see in the scrapyard. And it was just glorious. It was dirty, but it was glorious. And I learned how to mend cars, and I guess Dad showed me the mend and make do mentality, really. And I miss that car because there's so many happy memories of that car. It was a pretty good soldier. And I learned to drive in it. I kind of wish we still had it, but we don't because I checked and it's been scrapped. And the weird thing is Dad traded that in like 99 or 2000 for a Mark II Ford Granada, which was like a 1984 car. So my dad is like 2 generations behind the real world, which is what we always loved. We got a video recorder in 1998, 98. That's when we got a video recorder. So we grew up in a quiet village in Somerset. So my brother would always be tinkering with strange things, like he loved engines, my brother, and I liked driving. So we made a little basic go-kart, like a wooden kind of cliche looking go-kart, but it's never as good as it ought to be. And then a neighbour of ours had found this, well, knew they had it, like it was like a fun fairground dodgem, I suppose, in a hedge where they used to live, and pulled it out, and we had a look at it. And it was this beautiful like 1930s car. I had no idea what it was at the time. And me and my brother did it up, we painted it, and we might have even put flames on it. And basically that was our first car. It was a proper metal thing, old car with running boards, and like my brother put lights on it, but we weren't allowed to put an engine in it. My dad would never let us motorise it because he knew that we'd probably get carried away with it. So Greg used to push me, my brother pushed me, and I was normally the driver. And I remember we were like heroes on our housing estate because we had this awesome, like proper looking car. And I sometimes used to dress up in a racing suit. I had this sort of like kids racing suit. I thought I was so cool. I bought my first car when I was 16 and had to save up for it. I desperately wanted a Beetle. My dad was trying to talk me out of it because he'd read that they were rot boxes and all that stuff. But then I was determined, so when I finished my GCSEs, I worked all that summer full-time in a coffee shop, like a cafeteria thing, washing up and stuff, and saved and saved and saved and saved. And I sold my Tamiya radio control car, which was a monster Beetle, to put the money down for a real Beetle. Found the car in a weird way, bought an a friend of mine had an Auto Trader, a completely out-of-date Auto Trader in his bedroom one day, and I was flicking through it while he was in the toilet. And I found a Beetle in there advertised, but it was like 6 months old, so I figured it hadn't been sold. Phoned up and it was still for sale, and that was the car I ultimately bought. Me and my dad did it up, did some bits on it, serviced it, and redid the brakes and some body work. And I remember it was a special time because my dad's garage is full of rubbish, so we just used to do everything outside on the drive. And I've still got that car. I've had it 21 years. In fact, in about exactly now, like next week, it will be exactly 20 years since I passed my driving test. So I passed my test in 1996, was at college in Somerset and Taunton, and drove my Beetle to college, which I thought was pretty cool. Made some mods to it, and I'm a firm believer that cars don't get girls to this day. Or they haven't for me anyway. I've tried. But needless to say, really enjoyed school, did quite well with my GCSEs, always excelled at English and sort of arts, creative, art-based stuff. And then when I went to college, did A-levels in media studies and English language and art. And then when I went to uni, I kind of went to uni not exactly knowing the qualification I wanted, but I did media studies and I did digital computing, and I just didn't enjoy uni. I went to uni in London, which I think was a bad idea. I wish I'd gone somewhere kind of rural, really. And then about 6 months into my degree, I just started hounding magazines, certain magazines, for a job or for some work experience, because I'd done work experience 3 times when I was at school and college. Did one at Volksworld magazine, which was like my dream magazine back then, air-cooled VWs, and just eventually managed to get some work published, and I got a job on a magazine that was quite new called Flat 4. They kind of offered me a very low wage but a firm staff writer job. And that was it. Like within 3 weeks, Dad came and picked me up in the Granada. Yeah, in the Granada with the trailer, and took all my stuff from London to Chester. So I went and lived there, and I'd never even been there, and this is the furthest north I'd ever been in the country. So I was doing the magazine Flat 4, worked my way up through the ranks. It was a small publishing group, and you were doing everything. You know, organising shoots, budgets. I was doing photography as well. This is pre-digital, so transparency photography. I learnt an awful lot. Doing cover stories. It was quite liberating. The money was really low, so I used to supplement my income by buying and selling cars as well, which I still love. It's just an affection, really. It's an addiction, to be fair. I've only got one car in the garage, in my own garage here, which is the Enfield, the flux capacitor race car. And normally I've got another car. Normally I've got my wife's Figaro here, but that's having an engine rebuild. And then I've got 3 other garages. I rent 2 other garages, and I own another garage, so it's logistically it's quite complicated. It's a bit hoardy, really. So I've got the Dodge Charger in another garage, got the Allegro in another garage, got my Chevy Impala in another garage, and one more car is the Beetle, which is in another garage. And so while I was trading up my cars, I was trying to move up to editor. The mag got relaunched as Total VW by this point. But I realised I kind of got to the end of the potential in quite a niche, and I wanted to broaden my horizons, so I was desperate to get a job on Classic Cars magazine, I remember. And I eventually got a job after much hounding at EMAT Publishing, which is Classic Cars as part of it, but I worked on Car magazine and Revs and Max Power, and this was when the tuning scene was huge. I mean, Max Power was the biggest selling car magazine in Europe, bar none. People forget that. And also people forget that the irreverence of Max Power predates Top Gear. The Top Gear we know, with the knobbing around with 3-wheelers and doing stunts. Max Power did all that. Max Power did all that in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and it was a really cool. It was a cool mag to work on. We had good budgets, we had quite elastic creativity, and I loved coming up with the ideas and doing them. And it was quite a tribal feeling. You know, you go to an event, you go to a cruise, and just thousands of people turned up. We were always tasked by the editor to come up with a memorable feature. They were always like, make it memorable. And so I was always trying to come up with the quite extreme ideas. They liked extreme. I built a car for the Goldie-looking chain when I was on Revs, a Burberry Cavalier called the Chavalier. We nearly got sued by Burberry, that was fun. And then the Dukes of Essex idea came along because the Dukes of Hazzard film was coming out with Johnny Knoxville, and we sort of paid homage. I decided to use a Sierra because the Sierra was a kind of your typical Essex car at the time. So Dukes of Essex, we called it the General Lee on Sea, and I had the car prepped by a stock car builder. And then it was like, well, who's going to do the jump? And then it was like, no one really wanted to. Everyone liked the idea of it. And I kind of went, well, it's my idea, sod it, I'll just do it. And to be honest, didn't really think it was that scary up until I was about to hit the jump. The system like a true modern day Robin Hood. And to cut a long story short, I hit the jump too fast. We'd stripped this 2-litre Sierra down. It was quite quick on grass, and I just put it in third, and I should have left it in second. We did a 25 feet high jump, 75 foot long, ramp to ground, so no down ramp. To be honest, I probably should have put a down ramp in, but I didn't do the maths, and I didn't want to hit the down ramp too short, so I just said we'll just land on grass. But yeah, it did hurt my neck. I remember the noise my neck made when it sort of hyperextended, and to this day I do have neck problems as a result. It took me, I reckon it probably took me 7 years to realise that I needed to kind of do certain exercises, and I've spent a lot of money on osteopathy and, you know, bone clicky chiropractic and stuff. But I go to the gym every morning. I was at the gym this morning at 6:30 because of that incident. So I don't hate it, but every morning or every day when I have when my neck hurts when I look right, it's a reminder that I jumped to Sierra for max power. I've had to move around quite a lot for work, but I grew up in the country anyway. But I just live in. I like the countryside. I got made redundant. Hello, Carlo. I got made redundant, and funny enough, my wife had got made redundant about 5 months previous from the same company, and we weren't together. I always fancied her, but we weren't together. And we kind of got together around that time. But the thing is before I got made redundant at EMAP, I'd gone for a sort of secret audition for Fifth Gear. And this all came about purely because my friend Tom Ford, who was a journalist on Car Magazine, he was working on Fifth Gear, and he introduced me to the producer. We bumped into one another at Geneva Motor Show, and the producer got in contact with me and he said, you should come over to the TV production house for lunch one day. Okay, cool. No mention of a audition. So I went over there and I borrowed we had on test at the time on car, Mark V Golf GTI, white with the tartan interior. I loved that car. And turned up, and he said, I'll meet you in the car park, which I thought was a bit, you know, dogging style. And he came and met me in the car park and just produced a camera just like this, a big camera, and basically said, oh, do you want to talk about the car you've turned up in for 10 minutes? So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So it was a trick really into an audition, a screen test. And so I talked my way around this Mark V Golf GTI. Thank goodness I knew about it because I was sort of testing it. And I suppose that's why I've got a bit of a thing for Mark V GTIs now. And met them, had a good time, said goodbye, and I never heard anything from them for weeks. And I figured it was nothing was going to transpire. And then I got made redundant, got angry, got positive the week after, and then a week after that, I think 3 weeks in, got a call from North One Television about my audition. Said, we've shown the tape to Channel 5 and we'd like to book you on a job as a presenter. One job, and if you do all right, we might give you another one. And that was the start of my TV career, I suppose. So I got this gig on Fifth Gear. And the first piece that they wanted me to do was actually an idea I'd kind of casually mentioned to them about the fact that I'd read up about cars running on vegetable oil. So they said, brilliant, let's do that. Do that as your first piece. I went, okay, fine. So I drove across Britain in a Mercedes 124, W124, running it purely on veg oil. And it was a real experiment. I put it in for the first time when I got there. And I remember being quite nervous because I wasn't sure, you know, I'd never done any kind of theatre. I'd never done any formal training for TV. It was just my knowledge and my enthusiasm and using all your know-how as a journalist, speaking to a camera like it's a person. This is Southport Beach, just up the road from Liverpool. It's on the west coast of Britain. Over there is the east coast of Britain, and hopefully I'll be there this afternoon, having spent this much money on fuel. Wish me luck. My chariot will be this splendid Mercedes 250D, which cost me just 850 quid. For the first 199,000 miles of its life, it's run sweetly on diesel, but from now on, I'm going to try running it on waste vegetable oil. And did the item, really pleased with it, and then that basically opened the door to, well, I mean, what are we in? We're in 2016, I've done 10 years of Fifth Gear, which is 16 series. Those are pretty exciting. And, well, driven a lot of cars, crashed a few. Well, actually, when I say a few, literally 2. I've crashed them intentionally, but they don't count. But like, I remember the crash of the Mondeo. It was when Casino Royale came out, the James Bond, the first Daniel Craig Bond film. Ford had they paid to have product placement in it, and he was driving the new Mondeo. Went on the launch in Sardinia, we did a film, and they wanted me to try and like do a kind of pastiche of Daniel Craig, obviously, because I look just like Daniel Craig. And yeah, I crashed it. We were going around this closed mountain road, kind of coastal road, and they wanted me really close to the Armco barrier where the camera was mounted, and we must have done about 12 takes, getting closer, going faster. And it was that typical thing of I radioed through and went, you know, I don't think we can go any faster because it's getting to gravel now at the side. And they went, you'll be fine, just, you know, one more and that'll be it. So I rang this Mondeo out in second gear, going around this corner, and I remember it ran really wide, and the Armco ended, and I went wide, and then the Armco started again. So what I did in effect was rail slided. If you've ever done a rail slide on a skateboard, I basically did that with a brand new, still not even on sale yet, Mondeo. And it tore the whole front wheel off, it tore the whole front corner off it because it hit a massive concrete mounted sign which said, "Caution Mountain Road" or something. And yeah, it tore the car to pieces, and I was in the doghouse about that. Luckily, I mean, to be honest, the amount of cars I've driven and had to learn quickly, and not crashed at all, thanks for that, Carlo, been pretty lucky. Ironically, you know, you get to drive supercars and stuff, which can be quite frisky, and I crash a Mondeo. I'm kind of into, I mean, I bought this particular mower just because I love its mad, mental design, but it's kind of relevant to my life in that I got into lawn mowing from an early age because a lot of my neighbours were elderly. So me and my brother, I like to think we found a little niche in the market, and we started mowing lawns for all our elderly neighbours and earning pretty good money, to be fair. Seriously, have you ever seen a cooler mower than that? It looks better than it rides. So Fifth Gear was, you know, was the majority of my work for 2006 until, you know, a year or so ago. And it's been great because you never know where you're going to film, you never know what you're going to drive. And the thing for me is, and this is really important for me, is that I was often tasked with driving less exotic cars because it's actually easy to make films with exotic cars. You drive the new Lambo or Ferrari or whatever, it's always going to be interesting because it's the new Lamborghini or Ferrari. I was often tasked, certainly in the earlier days, with the more run-of-the-mill cars, the cars that actual people really bought, the mass-produced, mass-selling cars. And for me, I loved trying to come up with an idea or a hook for making that interesting. Stuff I've done on Fifth Gear, it's phenomenal. For a start, I get to work with Tiff and get to work with Vicky, and I've got to work with Plato, and they're friends now, and we've shared a lot of windy, cold days on airfields, but also gone to some cool places too. You know, I've high points, entering a drift contest in Norway with no prior experience. That was quite hardcore. Driving a Dakar winning truck, that was very cool. Since Fifth Gear, luckily I've managed to get my foot in the door with the BBC, which has been something that I've tried to do a number of times. It's quite a difficult door to get into. And that's kind of, I've got to show off the ground with Tom Ford, Wookie, my mate, called Mud, Sweat and Gears, which was a BBC show for BBC America. So we had to go out to America and film it, and it's essentially a competitive contestant show. I'm a team captain, he's a team captain, and we had to modify, cut up and carve up and destroy a car in 24 hours and then compete with it in challenges that we weren't completely sure what they were. So the theme for one episode would be like ultimate cop cars. So you'd choose a car, usually sort of sub $1,200 car, and then you'd have to modify it to do what you think it's going to get involved with. And that was a right laugh because I basically lived in Los Angeles for 3 months. It was quite hard on the family, but it was It was very cool. The temptation to buy cars and import them was immense, but I was restrained. So we did that a couple of years ago, and that has led on to the show I'm filming right now, which is called Motorheads, which is for BBC Brit, BBC Worldwide, and that is again with Tom Ford, Wookie Ford. Me and him present it's a clip show for vehicles. So if you think in my head, I'd like it to be known as kind of Harry Hill's TV burp for vehicles, and then when I'm not doing that, racing an electric car and driving around in a high mileage hybrid and maybe my Dodge Charger. On a day like today, I should have the Dodge out, really. The low points of working in the telly are that people think you're a millionaire. And I kind of missed that boat, apparently. So people think because you're on telly, you're minted. And they're like, well, why do you not live in a bigger house? And why do you drive around in a Honda Insight with 300,000 miles on the clock? You know, why don't you have an Aston Martin? It's like, well, because TV's not all glamour. It's a job. And don't get me wrong, it's an awesome job. I love it. Because I never wake up being bored, and I never wake up and dread what I'm going to do. It's tough work because it's long hours and you've got to be really driven and enthusiastic and kind of wired for it. But I know a lot of friends of mine who earn more from doing what they do for a living, but they're just less fulfilled. And I feel very privileged to still be doing telly, really. Because I never set out to do telly.